Hello, and welcome back to the Outdoor Minimalist podcast. I'm your host, Meg Carney, an outdoor and environmental writer and author of the book Outdoor Minimalist: Waste Less Hiking, Camping, and Backpacking. The Outdoor Minimalist podcast has a goal to give listeners actionable ways to waste less hiking, camping, backpacking, and more during every step of their process. Your impact outdoors starts long before you hit the trail and goes beyond leave no trace ethics. You'll learn how to identify sustainable outdoor brands, how to ask hard questions regarding sustainability, and begin to shift and evolve your mindset to integrate minimalism into all of your outdoor pursuits. Do you have dietary restrictions that prevent you from being able to eat pre-made backpacking meals? Or are you struggling to find backpacking recipes that fit your special dietary needs? Well, in episode 86 of the Outdoor Minimalist podcast, you have a chance to hear from one woman who created and implemented accessible backpacking and camping meals for her family to fit all of their special diets. Backpacking meals don't have to be expensive or complicated to plan. You just need to know where to start. Elon Jones is a freelance outdoor copywriter and adventurer. From sailing, kayaking, and backpacking, Elon has explored countless corners of the world. She continues to live an adventurous lifestyle and travels full-time with her family. Her passion for outdoor adventures formed early when she joined the Venture Scouts, and from there, the rest is history. So thanks for joining me today, Elon. I want to start us off with the typical question that I usually ask all of my guests, which is how you got into outdoor recreation and how it currently fits into your daily life.
So I actually got into it at a very young age because my older brothers were in Boy Scouts. And so, well, Cub Scouts and Boy Scouts. And so in Cub Scouts, the whole family goes camping. And so I've been camping since I was like 5, 6 years old. And it's just always been a fun experience for me to do. And so when I got older, I was in the Scouts and I joined Venturing Scouts, and it's really just been a beautiful story of how what I've learned in Scouts has really helped me kind of grow as a person in general. And yeah, that's what got me started.
And do you still camp a lot now? Is that your main outdoor hobby, or what types of activities do you like to do?
So it does depend on how you define camping. I define camping as a tent that I have to pitch myself. Currently, we actually live in an RV. So I know some people call that camping. As you can see, this is my backyard behind me. So I actually pretty much live outside now.
That's awesome. I love RV living, van living. I think it's
Uh,
really unique and it has its challenges, but
yeah.
I think every type of living has its
Oh, yeah.
challenges. So it's like
hmm
decide.
Everything has its problems. It's just different problems. And it's really the mindset you have when you go into it. If you go
Absolutely.
into it like, oh, I'm not going to have this and I'm not going to have this and I can't have this, then yeah, it's going to be awful. But if you go into it with, man, look at how much stuff I don't have to worry about cleaning now. That was me. I'm like, I don't have to clean 3 different rooms. I
Mhm.
don't have to clean 2 different bathrooms. This is fantastic.
Yeah, the responsibilities definitely have a really big switch in that lifestyle.
Mhm.
So our focus today is kind of on backpacking meals, and we've done a couple of episodes about backcountry eating, how to do it, lower waste, and also kind of like how to plan meals according to your diet.
Mhm.
And so this one is kind of like expanding on some of those episodes to be more focused into like how to actually get started into doing homemade backpacking meals. And you kind of had a unique perspective, which I
Mhm.
really appreciated. And so I think to start, if we could just maybe talk about your background, and since you have been camping pretty much your entire life, did you have like an early exposure to making your own meals in the backcountry, or was that something you started in your adult life?
Yeah, so we started with that right early on. When we were family camping, it was Dutch oven cooking and learning how to cook in a Dutch oven, learning the ways not to cook in a Dutch oven. um, I distinctly remember one cobbler that it was so burnt on, we just gave the Dutch oven to someone else to clean because they were like a Dutch oven cooking enthusiast, and they're like, "Oh, I know how to do it." And we're like, "Well, here you go, it's yours." Um, that's how bad that one was. But no, we've been cooking and really preparing meals our own selves. As far as backpacking meals go, I've been kind of DIYing those ever since high school when I first got into backpacking because okay, well the real reason was because I as a venture scout, you raise money for the things that you do. And so I pretty much had to pay for whatever I brought. And it was just cheaper to make it myself. And so that was like the era of canned chicken and Nor pasta sides. And it still was not my favorite meal in the world, but it was cheap and it fed me and I survived. But as I grew up, it's like, I really don't like this. I'd rather eat something good while I'm camping. And so I tried like the prepackaged meals. I thought MREs were clearly the way to go. No, no, MREs taste disgusting. And then I tried another brand, I forget what it was, but it just tasted like mush too. And I'm like, the stuff I make is better than this. I'm just gonna make my own stuff. But that's when I really got into making and prepping my own things and making sure it was things I liked. Because I actually went on this a trek to Philmont. I was a part of the Philmont trek, and I did not like any of the food they had. The few things that I did eat, because that's the other thing, I'm a picky eater. Um, the few things they did have that I ate, it's basically all pasta, straight protein, boulder bars, and it's like I was miserable the whole time because I was constipated, and it was just it. I'm at the pinnacle of scouting is getting to go to Philmont and I am miserable. So that was another time where I'm like, no, I'm going to do this myself and I'm going to do it right. And that kind of experience really prepared me for where we're at now because my husband actually has several intolerances. One is dairy, one is soy, and he also has a fructose intolerance. So even like the vegan things that are dairy free, they have soy, so you can't really have that. Even the things that are soy free, they typically have dairy. And he really can't have a lot of vegetables. So that really cuts out a lot of paleo, vegan, whole 30, all that stuff. And so it's being able to DIY his meals. He's pretty much a straight carnivore right now. Being able to DIY his meals has really helped us still enjoy backpacking and camping, even though, we can't buy the uh, easy, easy packed meals.
Yeah, I think the easy, like the pre-made meals, I think they definitely have some pros to them. But you did mention like some of the challenges. And I'm not someone that has like traditionally used those meals. I've tried a few in like the recent years just to see what they're all about. And I've had
Yeah,
some
they're any
pretty
better?
good ones. Yeah, I think they
Okay.
are really improving. Some of them I'm like, that's really, yeah, I would eat
Yeah.
that outside of the trail. Kind of like it's
Okay.
actually good.
I,
But I
I
think
have
it's like
seen a lot of them that it's like, ooh, that really does look good.
yeah, unfortunately, my absolutely favorite one that I found, they discontinued. And so I was like, dang
No.
it. Like
Why?
it would have been nice to have like a backup, like if I didn't
Yes.
have time to make a meal or something. But
Hmm.
you also mentioned some of the pros of making your own meals. So like it tends to be cheaper. Backpacking meal, like pre-made ones can be pretty expensive, like $14 and sometimes like
Yeah.
20 plus dollars
Hmm.
per meal, which isn't very accessible for most people, I would
Yeah.
say.
I mean, if you're
Um,
the kind of person who gets takeout every day, then yeah, it's about on par with that. So it's not like they're outrageously overpriced.
mhm.
But if you're someone who lives on a budget like we do, it's like not really in the budget.
Absolutely. Yeah. So kind of just like knowing your own needs is like a good way maybe to decide if homemade or pre-made is
Mhm.
right for you. But also some of the other things that you mentioned were like you get to choose the flavors, you get to choose the ingredients, and that really aligns with
Mhm.
kind of like dietary restrictions, which I'm also a
Yeah,
person with a lot of dietary restrictions. And
yeah.
so I have struggled even with, like you were saying, the vegan meals. It's like, okay, well, that
Mhm.
includes like chocolate and agave, and I can't have those things. And like, what am I
Oh,
supposed to
so
do? And
yes.
so, do you find I don't know if you would be able to speak on this from your experience, but, like, do you have any other examples of, like, ways that it might be easier to be making your own backpacking meals versus buying them, off the
Mhm.
shelf, or were those kind of, like, the main ones?
Those are kind of the main ones, but as far as easy ways to make them, um, because it's not just about easy, right? Because easy is chicken and rice, right? You still wanna be able to function, but you still have to make sure you're working within your own dietary needs because the last thing you want is to, include something that you have a sensitivity to, and then you are miserable all night getting up and down out of the tent. So really being able to basically write down the normal meals that you make that you like, right? So for me, that's I love anything caprese. Basil, tomato, mozzarella, and balsamic, I am there for that. So I basically figured out how to make my pasta caprese on the trail. And you just make trail friendly substitution. So, like, one of the things that you can substitute pretty easily are sun dried foods, right? So, I use sun dried tomatoes instead of real tomatoes because they kind of get mushy on the trail, right? Basil, you can actually pack pretty well. You can do it dry if you want, but you can pack fresh basil. I know a lot of people don't think about that, but you can. You just wrap it up in a paper towel and you pack it with the rest of the meal that day. And then you can also be smarter about the kinds of pastas you're using. In a lot of the prepackaged meals, right? They're just going to use normal. I mean, some of them will use whole grain pastas, but most of them will just use your normal white bleached flour pastas, right? Well, they make these wonderful legume pastas now that are pretty economical. I mean, it's not $1 a box, it's more like $2.50 a box. Still pretty economical because I can usually split it into two meals. And so those keep me regulated better. They give you more protein, more fiber, more energy. And so that's just a really smart way to let help your body recover from the intense exercising that backpacking actually is. I know a lot of people don't always think of backpacking as like intense exercise, but you're carrying a 50, 40 for me really, but 40, 50, 60 pound backpack on your back up up inclines, and yeah, this is strenuous exercise. So your body needs those things to recover from it. And just being able to include those like dried vegetables and things like that in your meal is gonna help your body feel good and be able to get up the next morning. I haven't been able to experiment a lot with like freeze dried foods. That's something my husband and I have talked about because we'd like to. Have you experimented with those at all?
No, I haven't. I have considered, like, purchasing, like, the bulk freeze-dried stuff
Yeah,
to
we have
try it,
two.
but I just have not invested in it because I'm like,
Yeah.
sometimes it comes in such large portions. I was like, "If I really hate it, what am I supposed to do with all this?"
Yeah. We're
Um,
in the same boat.
yeah, and I do like that you mentioned kind of, like, evaluating the things that you already eat and you already like to be eating
Mhm.
because, like, you experienced, like, earlier in your life that some, like, severe dietary changes when you're on the trail are gonna really throw your system off, and so, like,
Mm,
you're probably gonna be either not pooping at all or maybe pooping too much, and no one really wants
yeah.
either one to be
Nope.
happening in the backcountry.
Mhm.
If you can stay regular, that is
Yeah.
ideal, and one less thing you have to worry about. And
And
so
the other thing about that is if you're not eating right, you're more tired. I mean, when I went on that trip to Philmont, I was in my teens, so I was like, peak energy and everything, but I would be so white at the end of the day. We got to hike up. This is like the coveted trail to go from Lower Bonita up to Lookout Meadow. And I mean, the sunset there is gorgeous, but that is the only part that I remember because I did not have the energy to get out and explore. After we got there, it was early afternoon and I was in my tent sleeping because I was just done.
yeah, and that might take some trial and error too, like, if you're newer to backpacking, knowing how much you actually need to eat on the trail versus, like, at home and stuff like that. So I guess next I'm kind of wondering the example that you gave with the pasta, it sounded like a lot of those things you could get readily available and just combine from the store. And
Mhm.
so do you do any dehydrating to make your meals, or is it pretty much like you're kind of buying the ingredients or buying them in bulk?
So I will tell you the best like snack on the trail that you can like just keep in your pocket is fruit leather because it lasts forever. You can keep it in your food storage and pull it out whenever you need it, and it tastes amazing. So that's like the one thing that I'm passionate about. We have every time
Do
because
you
it's just
dehydrate that or do you buy
yeah,
it?
I
Oh,
dehydrate
okay.
that myself. And here's the thing, when you do it yourself, you can control how much sugar goes on it. You can control if you use honey or sugar. You can also add things like chia seeds, which actually really help with their more protein, more fiber, more energy combined with that sugar. Because a lot of backpacking stuff is a lot of sugar. But sometimes you need that like mid-afternoon snack to get you through. And that's something it's light, it's easy, and it still has good, healthy stuff in it. So that's the main thing that I've dehydrated. Like I said, my husband and I have talked about getting a freeze dryer to like freeze dry our own things. We haven't taken that leap yet. But we've also done jerky. And jerky works well. My teeth doesn't like jerky. My teeth don't like jerky, excuse me. And so I usually just let it sit in my mouth until it's mush, and then I'll eat it.
Interesting approach.
Yes.
Um, well, you mentioned that your husband eats like primarily animal-based like
Yeah.
proteins. And so
Hmm.
is the jerky the only one that you make on your own? And how do you
Yeah.
incorporate more of those proteins into the backcountry diet?
Yes. So the jerky that he can have is something that I pretty much have to make because one of the main things, like when you're fructose intolerant, one of the main things you can't have is garlic. And garlic is in just about everything. I love garlic. So I usually like make my own stuff separate from his. But yeah, I would make his jerky so that he can have something. But as far as incorporating carnivore stuff for him, is I do a lot of either the foil packets because there are some of those that are just straight plain chicken. When I say a few, I mean like five for him. Uh, but we'll do a lot of foil packets for him. Um, Sometimes canned, depending on what kind of trip we're going on. If it's more of a leisurely trip and we can, carry the weight, we do that. And then I usually just pair those meats. Sometimes we'll do salmon. That's actually another one that I feel like has come a long way because you can get it in the foil packets and it still tastes pretty good. So we'll do, one of his proteins with either a rice or a pasta because he can still have gluten. That's one of the things he still can have. So he'll usually have a protein, rice or pasta. He's gotten to where he can do some amounts of quinoa. So that's another thing that I think is like another grain that I think is overlooked in the backpacking world a lot of times because quinoa actually is a whole food. It has healthy fats, it has healthy minerals, it has fiber, it has protein. So I know one of my favorite things to make for me is actually quinoa tacos on the trail because it cooks like rice. It's you actually need less of it to fill you up than you would rice, and it's beautiful. It's small, it's light, and it tastes amazing. It takes on the taste of whatever you're putting with it. So if you put taco seasonings on it, it tastes like tacos. It's fantastic. But that's really how we incorporate um, for his diet things. Oh, the other thing we take is summer sausage.
Mm.
Summer sausage, and there's one kind of pepperoni I have found because I haven't figured out how to make pepperoni yet. Uh, there are some things that it's like, we'll just buy that.
Yeah,
But
sometimes like the
yeah,
work that goes into like making it on your own is a little
yeah,
bit
it's a little
much,
much.
and you just have to be like, okay, these are the things I'll make and these are the things that I'll buy.
Yes, exactly. It is worth it to me to buy the pepperoni and the summer sausage. So those are two things that we take a lot on the trail for him as well.
Um,
What else do we do for him?
What about like plant-based options? You mentioned the lentil pasta or I know they make
Hmm.
a lot of different bean pastas. I'm a big fan of the bean
Yeah, they
pastas.
do. Hmm.
Yeah, so that's always a good option. The edamame one is my favorite, but I like all
Really?
of
I
them.
haven't tried that one. I'll have to try that one. Okay.
I've only found it in the like spaghetti noodle version, not any
Okay.
shapes or anything like that, but
Hmm.
it has the best flavor from what I found.
Okay. I'll have to try that one. Yeah, so as far as incorporating vegetables, this is really more for me and my girl. Um, is I will do a lot of dried vegetables and rehydrate them, like the sun-dried tomatoes. Oh, what was I tried it? I tried something new recently. I think it was mushrooms, dried mushrooms, and we made like a mushroom risotto that was really delicious. Uh, what was the other one? Oh, the other one was in the international food aisle. You'll usually have there will be like an Asian section, and they have these packets. It's a soup packet, is what it is. Okay, but it's a lot of dehydrated vegetables basically. And so I will take that soup packet and I will pour it in with the quinoa, or because quinoa is amazing and it takes on whatever you put with it. Or whether we're doing rice or whatever, I'll put that in with it. And it rehydrates the vegetables while you're cooking whatever grain you're having at the same time. So I find little things like that where like they've already given you the dehydrated things and you can just use them. The other thing I do is I look at vegetables that don't need to be refrigerated, right? You don't need to refrigerate potatoes. You don't need to refrigerate carrots. They last longer when you do, for sure, but you don't need to do that. And to me, it's worth the wait to bring food that I know I'm going to eat, that I know will fuel me. Now, if I'm doing a longer backpacking trek, I probably wouldn't use that strategy. But if I'm just doing like a weekend backpacking thing, which is really all I have time for right now, uh, then that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna take things that they don't need to be refrigerated, um, they don't need to be cared for specifically, and I'll just bring the real thing. Yes, it's heavier, but to me, it's worth the wait. I'll do the same thing with eggs because I have friends who keep chickens, and so I'll bring eggs on the trail, and we'll have eggs for our first breakfast. That way you're eating them quickly, so you're not carrying them the whole time. But I'll do that. And the other thing that I don't know if we talked about this, but the other thing that I make sure that I bring is dessert because
Yeah, I always bring dessert. That is like
yeah.
everyone has their things when they're backpacking, and
Hmm.
food is one of my main things that just like brings me so much joy. And so
Yeah.
whenever I plan trips with friends, we have like a little spreadsheet and there's always a column for dessert.
Yeah. There has to be dessert because it's like I just did this whole thing. I deserve
Mhm.
dessert. And so I figured out how to make things like chocolate cake on the trail and chia seed pudding. That one only works if it's cold outside, so don't do it in summer during the hot periods. But things like that you can mix these things ahead of time, package them in. I like to use like paper bags because if as long as you're going to a place that allows you to burn, you can just burn it. You don't have to carry it out with you. Um, most of the prepackaged stuff, I also find it to have just so much packaging. And so even when the few times I did bring it, I would take it apart and then basically put it back together again with less trash. And so if you package things in paper bags, then you can just burn it. You don't have to worry about taking it with you. Depending on where you're going, of course.
Yeah, yeah, and kind of knowing like the type of trip that you're going on, like you're saying, like you can bring the full fruits and vegetables on short trips, if especially if you're not an ultralight hiker, but on longer
Hmm.
trips, maybe not. But even on longer trips, if you're like a through hiker, you might have like the stopovers and you want to grab a couple apples or a couple
Yeah.
carrots to enhance your
Hmm.
meals. I don't think that's not necessarily a bad thing. Um, and you
I'll
talked
tell
a
you
little,
another thing that I've looked into is actually foraging. And of course, this is also going to depend on where you go and making sure you're still kind of keeping with leave no trace principles. But there are a lot of foods along the trail, like trail lettuces, that you can pick as you go. And you're not going to pick a lot because you're just feeding yourself that night. But you can forage a lot of depending on where you are.
Yeah, and your knowledge of the plants in that area to use caution when you're
Yeah.
foraging.
Yeah. Do
Yes,
not go picking
there's
mushrooms if you don't know what they are.
absolutely, yeah, just avoid that altogether.
Yeah.
But that is also, yeah, that's a good way to like get a couple more like fresh vegetables, fruits and vegetables into your diet and also not have to carry them the whole time.
Yeah.
Um,
Mhm.
you touched a little bit on packaging with the paper bags, which is interesting. I haven't really heard of people doing that before, but it's a good idea.
So
So do you,
I will add to that because the thing people always talk to me about is, well, what if it gets wet?
yeah, that's the big
And
concern.
so you always have at least one bag that you're going to put any trash in, whether it's trash you find along the trail or trash you generate. And so I always make sure I usually have one bag for like toiletry trash, and then I have one bag for food trash. A lot of times I won't necessarily need the food trash bag, um, but I'll put the food in it so that all of my meals will usually fit in that one bag and they're going to stay dry. If I have food trash, it just goes in the same bag, but the food trash isn't normally going to be wet or contaminated at all. So it doesn't hurt the food that's in there already. So that's how I make sure the bag doesn't get wet. But I also know a lot of trails will not let you burn. And so I think that's why it's not as popular, because a lot of trails don't let you burn. And so, of course, you'd still be packing it out anyway.
Yeah, so basically you just found a different disposable alternative. And I
Yeah.
mean, if you have a larger resealable bag, then also you don't really have to worry about your food spoiling or anything like
Yeah.
that.
hmm
Um, have you ever experimented with like any reusables of any kind that you could recommend?
As far as reusable bags, I haven't really found one that I really like. I've experimented with like the silicone ones, and they're okay. Like they get the job done, but I've still had situations where they either tear easily or they don't stay closed. And so it's like, oh yeah, you work. I just can't depend on you if I really need you to stay closed.
Yeah, and I haven't personally used silicone bags backpacking, primarily because of the weight. And I think that that
Yeah,
is kind of like a big deterrent for some
that's another
people.
one.
Mm. There's been I can't think of the brand off the top of my head, but there is one that is like a fabric bag that has a lining, and that one seems like it might be more reliable. And I have been wanting
Yeah,
to try those.
my mom actually made fabric bags. She's just started doing this. Fabric bags that she treats with beeswax. And you're supposed to be able to wrap your food in it, sandwiches, whatever, wrap it in that, and it works just like a plastic bag because of the beeswax. And of course, the beeswax is already antimicrobial, so it's not going to start growing things. To clean it, you just wipe it off. So I have experimented with those. My problem with those is they still don't really stay shut. And so she's like been working on her design to fit
Yeah,
my needs.
I do like those wax wraps, and I have used them
Yeah.
before, but
hmm
generally for things that I'm not worried about like spilling or something like that.
Yeah.
But I find that they stay closed a little bit better in like warmer weather, but
Yeah.
not
hmm
in
When
cold.
it's cold, it doesn't stay.
Mm-mm.
hmm
Um, okay, so we talked a little bit about like eliminating waste and stuff like that. And then I guess yeah, that's kind of how we reduce backpacking. We answered those ones.
hmm
Okay, so if people are just getting started in this process and aren't really sure where to begin or kind of like what to do, what resources do you think that you would recommend for people that are interested in making their own meals, whether it's like fully dehydrating their own or like gathering the materials to put it together?
So if you're looking to put together your own materials from just your excuse me, from just your local store, um, I would start actually by finding your like three favorite meals. All right. For me, that's basil caprese, uh, basil caprese pasta, and I just went blank. What was this one? Basil caprese pasta. Oh, sometimes I'll put bacon with that. Bacon bits on the trail. That's a good idea, by the way. Um, I really don't remember what this one is. What are my favorite meals? Oh, tuna fish. There we go. Sorry. There's a tuna packet that's actually Thai tuna, and I actually really like that one. So I'll put that one in a wrap. And the way I do my wraps is I wrap everything except the tuna in it. So I'll put in the lettuce, I'll put in the cheese. As long as you're using a hard cheese, that'll last, a day or two. So I'll just layer it all in there and I'll wrap it up. And then when it comes time to eat, I just put the tuna in there and it's ready to go. So it was that one, the tuna wrap. Oh, and my chicken quinoa taco. Those are my favorites. So just find the three meals that you like and be like, okay, how do I make this backpacker friendly? Um, and backpacker friendly is, you find your grain, your starch, you throw in at least one vegetable, try, and then you add in your protein, and that's all it is. But yeah,
Awesome. Yeah,
and
I think
that's just from Walmart. That you don't have to go anywhere fancy to get that stuff.
yeah, I like that it is really accessible and that most people would be able to get those ingredients and
Yeah.
like do it
Hmm.
themselves. Can you recommend any like specific resources, like maybe like books or websites or something that where you have learned some things?
Um, let's think. See, a lot of this I just learned through my own experience. So as far as like books and things, I don't really have any. As far as meals, as far as like websites, um, yeah, honestly, I'll usually just look up a recipe and then adapt it myself.
Yeah, yeah,
I
no, I
shouldn't
like that
even give
approach.
you one.
Yeah, I like that approach. I mean, it allows it to
Mhm.
be easily personalized,
Because
and
really, any book or any cookbook or anything like that I would use, I would have to adapt anyway because of my husband's intolerances. Oh, and my girls are also dairy intolerant. So I'm always adapting things.
yeah, absolutely. I guess the one that I would always recommend to people if they are interested in learning more about making their own backcountry meals is Backcountry Foodie, and she was on the podcast a couple
Oh,
of times, and she has
yeah.
good resources like to get started. So if listeners aren't sure where to start and want an online
Hmm.
resource, that is who I would recommend. But I do like your approach. It's like it's more so my approach as well. It's like, well,
Yeah.
I'm just gonna figure it out, and if it doesn't work, then I'll try it
Mhm.
different next time.
That's what you got to do. You got to find out what works for you.
Yeah, sometimes you have really horrible experiences, and I'm still alive, but it tasted bad. So
Mhm.
it happens. Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing all those experiences, and kind of like your process. I really like that it is really
Yeah.
approachable, and you can personalize it for your own needs. So how can
Mhm.
listeners learn more about you? And I know that you don't do this like as a living, so you're a copywriter, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
So if people wanted to learn more about like the work that you do and things like that, like how can they do that?
So you can go to my website at elonjones.com or I'm on LinkedIn. Feel free to connect there. I'm just Elon Jones, nice and simple. I also have kind of a little gift for any of you small business owners out there who like to either guide people or if you're an outfitter, I have kind of a list of opt-in incentives you can use to get people in your area active in your own area. And so Megan's going to put those in the show notes for you. But I also put together kind of a meal plan for just a 2-day weekend trip of kind of the backpacking meals that I use when I go backpacking. So it might be a good jumping off point for y'all to get started.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, yeah, I'll be sure to share the links to all of that in the show notes. So if people want to check them out after they listen to this, they can do that there. And I just had a big brain fart, but yes. And with that, thank you so much for sharing all that information. And I hope everyone else found it just as valuable as I did.
All right. Thank you, Megan.
Thanks for listening. And if you like what you hear, let me know. Leave a review and be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. You can find us on Instagram at outdoor.minimalist.book or subscribe to our weekly newsletter at theoutdoorminimalist.com for even more updates, educational resources, and to help build an outdoor community with the shared goal to create a better outdoor space as we recreate.